Welcome to the rabbit hole. Let's talk about the ego. The ego is something that I find to be the most interesting aside from consciousness, because basically these two things capture the essence of existence, the universe, and of course, who we are. Wayne Dyer once said, the ego is an acronym for edging God out. And I love Wayne Dyer. I love the acronym. But I think that the acronym leaves people to assume that the essence of the ego is to completely take God out the picture and is something that in itself is bad and in itself creates disharmony, unhappiness, and suffering. But I argue and I state that the ego has a purpose. The problem is we often are not managing our ego very well. And when you have a mismanaged ego, essentially you have the devil within you, because the mismanaged ego is coming from a place of fear. It's coming from a place of old programmings to protect you from harm. The issue is the information that the ego is based on is old information from a child, because essentially everything that you experienced as a child, you came to some kind of conclusion or understanding, and then you decided this was harmful for me, and that was programmed into your subconscious and thus created this persona called ego. Now, the ego in itself, like I said, is not harmful. The ego has a purpose, and that purpose is to protect us. That purpose, in a sense, is to edge God out. Now, let me explain. When we talk about edging God out, the ego's job is to separate. The ego's job is to create your identity. In order for you to thrive on this planet, you have to have an identity. You have to have individuality in order to acknowledge things like danger or harm. So when you don't have that and you feel at one with everything solely, then when when our ancestors were alive, and we saw a lion, we just said, oh, we're one with the lion. Meanwhile, the lion is attacking us and killing us, right? Or if we're fighting another tribe, we'll say, oh, we're one, we're aligned, and that tribesman will kill us, right? But the point is the ego serves a purpose of protection because it acknowledges, though, yes, we are one, which is a spiritual perspective, in the physical world of survival, we have to acknowledge the separation, and we have to acknowledge when danger is present in order to protect ourselves. And thus, over time, as we evolved into modern civilization, we have also evolved from the things that cause us physical harm, but considering the things that cause us more emotional, mental, and even spiritual harm. And thus, we create blocks, emotional blocks, or emotional responses or reflexes that we think are productive, we think help us out. But really, when we analyze it consciously, they are probably not the best responses or the best ways to think or approach life. And that's where we get into reprogramming our subconscious mind, changing our ego, and basically how we think about life, how we react to life. But that's not what this is about. This is solely about the ego and the ego's purpose. This is really about understanding significance of the ego when it comes to our relationship with grand consciousness and understanding that you are everything, right? Because the ego says that you are not. The ego says you are not everything. You are simply one. You are you. And that is true. It is completely true. You need to understand you are both. You are absolutely one. You are everything. And you are absolutely alone by yourself, basically nothing. You have to understand that the path of spirituality isn't a path of choosing one side over the other. The path is about understanding both sides and being in the middle. When you are in the middle, then you are not attached either way, but you realize that both serve a purpose in the balance of your universe. And so when I talk about being God, many people will ask the question, well, if I'm God, then why am I? Why, even in my explanations, in my talks, I say you are one, but then I also acknowledge that you are an individual. And so that leads people to be confused. Which one is it? It is both. Realize, though, that the more you identify with I, the more you're in the space of ego. And that's okay. And the more you identify as us or it or everything, the more you identify with consciousness and less with ego. So it's really about where you are in your spiritual journey. There is no advancement. There is no, you're here and somebody else is there, or you're, not in a good place spiritually. You are where you are, and that is perfect and fine. So this journey is more about acceptance than more about progression. I like to use the analogy of an apple and the seed of an apple. When you take the seed of an apple and you plant it, what grows? An apple. Now, take the apple and use that as consciousness, God, so to speak. You are the seed, right? You are the child of God. You are the son or the daughter of God. You are that seed. Now, depending on where that seed grows, the environment it is in, the type of soil it grows in, how much it is watered and catered to, dictates what that apple turns into or how well that apple grows. That apple or apple tree will produce many apples. Okay, that apple may not look the same as the apple that the seed came from originally, but nonetheless, it is still an apple. Some may say, well, that is not the same apple in itself. Now we have multiple apples. So if we have multiple apples, then that is not the original apple that the seed was taken from. Therefore, it is not God. But it is, because it's still an apple. Though it may multiply, it is still an apple. And so, as with someone with, serious, well-rounded intellect can really observe the differences and really break down from a place of ego, which separates, you have to understand the common thread. That's the key to all of it, is what is the common thread here? And to simplify everything. The more complex we make it, the more we're in our ego about it, because complexity creates separation. But the more simple something is, then the more understanding it is, the more it creates a connection. It creates a unity, so to speak. So be mindful about your path and understand that you are not in a wrong place. So if you don't understand, or if something seems weird, even if something seems contradictive, guess what? The universe is a contradiction. Okay. Once you acknowledge that the universe is a contradiction, then you realize that your spiritual walk is a contradiction. And so when you are at a place where you think you need to choose one or the other, realize that it's both. The universe is infinite. The universe is abundance. There is not one way, right? We have many religions. We have many people. Each person is their own religion. Everybody is on the path that they're supposed to be on. So as you think about this idea of the ego, think about its nature, right? What it does. Its job is to protect you ultimately by creating an individuality. And that individuality, if it is not managed, will then not identify or understand the concept of oneness. It will continue to create separation, distancing you from your true essence, which is God, because it is bringing you further and further away from that as it creates more of an individualized identity of self. You are further away from your godness. That doesn't mean you're completely severed from it. No, because you will never be severed from it. But it just means you have some distance. And the distance really is irrelevant, because once you make that connection, you can instantly be in your godhood. So be mindful about that. The ego has a purpose, but you must manage and cultivate that purpose so that way that seed, right, which is who you are, continues to be nourished in a place that is well balanced. If we take that seed and we say consciousness is pure water, and then we say the ego is pure dirt, if we take that seed and plant it in a place that is completely ego, which is dirt, right, which would be more like the desert, then it won't grow. If we take that seed and we plant it in just water, it won't grow. But we have to bring those two things together in a good balance. If we take that seed and plant it in well-moistured soil, that seed will grow into a huge apple tree with a multitude of apples. And this is the significance of understanding why ego is important, why identifying how you are creating a separation between yourself and God. Most importantly, realize that where you are in your spiritual path and understanding and questioning these ideas and concepts are not wrong. It means that you are on the walk, that you are conscious about where you're going and how you're thinking about your existence and your connection with everything. It is the person, though, that shuts it down and says, no, my way is the right way. The way I was taught is the right and only way. Those people concern me. But again, that is not wrong for them as well. That is their path that they need to go on. So if you're that kind of person, continue to go on your path. I wish you the best of luck. But realize that this channel and what I talk about may not be a match for you unless you're open to actually thinking about different possibilities or considering different ways of thinking. And if you are, then please welcome. And I invite everybody who is really curious about this conversation to continue to join me on this journey, because it's a fun journey. Now, I thank you so much for being a part of this. Peace and abundance always.